My last video on debunking the fact of the myth that X-Men have always been woke sparked a lot of comments on the video. Some people did understand my point. A lot of people didn't. They said, I don't know what I'm talking about. I don't understand this. The X-Men always been woke. I just talking stupidness. I don't know what I'm saying. All these different things. Now, I have no problem with anybody disagreeing with me. I think conversation, debate is healthy. There's nothing wrong with that. I encourage it. If you have a different opinion to mine, like I always say, I'm happy to hear it, happy to listen, no problem with that, as long as you keep it professional and don't make anything obscene or anything like that. I have no problem. We will be okay with that. Not an issue with anybody disagreeing with me. But a lot of people kept making some comments in regards to certain things. So I decided I would make a second video on this and try to explain the points I was trying to make before. Now, like I said, some people didn't understand what I'm saying. Apparently, some people didn't. So I will try to make that in this video, I would try to explain in greater detail the reason as to why not only the X-Men, but comics in general were never woke. So allow me to see if I could do that. I just encourage people to just listen to this video and try to understand exactly what I'm trying to say. Now, before I get into the whole matter involving comics, I need to address something that I came to understand in regards to the last video. A lot of people don't understand what the term woke actually means, what it entails. So allow me to go through that again. Now, woke is defined as an adjective derived from African American vernacular English, meaning alert to racial prejudice and discrimination. That is where it's supposed to end. That the term was first started in like about around 2010s or something there. It dealt with racial prejudice and discrimination in the fact that, black people would have to realize that, certain things were harder for them than for other people. They weren't getting opportunities to certain things like that. The whole term woke is derived from the term wake up to what's happening. That's why they used to use the term stay woke. Stay awake, stay aware to what is happening. There are certain things going on, and you need to be aware. That is where the term supposed to end. That is what it was. It was derived, it was created, it was used by black people for that purpose. You understand me? That's where it was. But as usual, with all things, activists decided to then hijack the term to push their own agenda. They then go on to say we become a broader awareness of social inequality such as racial injustice, sexism, and denial of LGBT rights. All of which is nonsense because these things were not happening, but these people needed to make it seem like it was. So they hijacked the term. So when I use the term woke, I am using it sarcastically in regards to the fact that the term has been hijacked by these people. Now, there are many who will say that when I say, the people who will say that when they use the term woke, they're not referring to how it's been taken over by people on the left and this one kind of thing that they made it different way. No. Once you're saying it, once you're using it, that's what you're referring to it for. Because when you think in concept that, comics dealing with something involving racism or prejudice or things like that, means that is woke. No, these were matters and things that were always dealt with in comics in one form or another. It had nothing to do with anything involving anybody being woke. These were lessons and literal life lessons, I think that were done in such a way to teach and encourage and help people understand. There were characters who were good guys, who had these pillars about them that you could understand, and that was it. Nothing involving anything more. So people think that when you see the same, it had racism or civil rights, all of that encompasses wokeness. No. What these people who encouraging this whole woke thing want They want to take modern day nonsense and act like, it was always there, because all these gender study people who want to deal with woke and all of this wokeness and all of this, they want to take it and say, well, because it had because it had one or two stories that may have had some underlying thing involving racism in it, or that is wokeness. It have people of diverse individuals throughout comics. That's woke. They had this. No, all these things were always there, but they are trying to change it to make it seem like this was supposed to be something. But they had people in comics for years who were gay and all these matters and things. You understand? But you never had stories about them sitting around all day making out with whoever they were with. No, they had actual things that they had to do. But these people want you to believe that, okay, if they say everything is woke and you believe everything is woke and you join in with them in woke, then that means that you could change stories or change history to say it's supposed to be the way that they want it to be. It's the same thing like when people say about toxic masculinity. There is no such thing as toxic masculinity. If you will say, well, toxic masculinity is when it is, you see, some men talk wrong to women or treat them out. That's not toxic masculinity. That's being an asshole. When you use the term toxic masculinity, you refer to the fact that everything masculine is toxic. But you never hear them say toxic femininity, because they want men to be soft and feminine. That's what they want. I was speaking with this woman a little while back, and I was telling her the same point. I said, you all want to talk about toxic masculinity and you want to make men feminine, but when it is now you go out with this man and somebody comes out, pulls out a knife and say, give me your money, and your man starts screaming harder than you and take off running. What you're going to do then? Then you're going to want a man to actually be a man. But no, it's the same thing involving this. Stop injecting your modern day nonsense into things that were never there and then trying to act like, wokeness was always present there. It was never there. It was never there. Dealing with racism, bigotry, right and wrong, family issues, all these kind of things has nothing to do with wokeness. These are the lessons and things like that good guys always did. That's what made them good. That's what was important to them. That's what they did. Trying to pretend like, all of a sudden everything that was happening had something to do with wokeness is crap. So I wanted to just establish that fact to understand. Other people are misaligning and thinking that, woke means something it doesn't. It does not. These people are trying to pretend like everything is woke. When you think that they're defending racism or not. Their version of defending anything to do with racism is that you must forcibly inject, you understand me, people into roles that they were never supposed to be in. You have the Little Mermaid for years. White, make them black. If people don't like that, call them racist and attack them. You understand me? Sexuality, swap this character. Gender, swap this character. Even if it makes no sense, this is what they do. And when you see people say, wokeness was always there, you're encouraging this. And this is why people are so worried about it. When people think about the whole controversy involving X-Men 97 and more found and because people don't want this modern day garbage pushed in to what has always been there, and that is what they're planning to do when they do these things. This is why people are worried. This is why people don't like you saying that X-Men, I think, will always work, because it wasn't. Okay, so I've covered that point here now. Now I want to go over two articles involving Stan Lee and Chris Claremont, and also Chuck Dixon, who actually breaks down everything that I've been saying very, very accurately. So let's take a look at what Stan Lee, and this comes from this article is from Fandom Pulse. No, Stan Lee and Chris Claremont didn't always intend the X-Men to be woke. That's a simple, straightforward fact. What they've done to them now, well, that's a different story. When they talk about how with the news about X-Men 97 and all of this and the non-binary and all of this stuff, I want to deal with that, so I'm not going to go through that. Let me continue what I did. The first rumor that was easily debunked is that Stan Lee had Professor X and Magneto as an allegory for Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X, and that the X-Men were meant to be highlight the civil rights struggle in America in the 1960s. This was not true in the least, as the X-Men was simply created as another team book, and the success after the success of the Fantastic Four, using a familiar formula of a group of men with one beautiful woman for them to pine over in what was simply another boys' action comic book in the superhero genre. X-Men had nothing to do with Martin Luther King and Malcolm X and the civil rights struggle. No, X-Men were primarily just a superhero team. That's what they do. Even when they try to say, you know what, they highlight, the majority of the time that the X-Men spent as a team, they would be battling some villain doing something, or they'd be off in space fighting the Shi'ar. The only time they ever had to deal with mass, with all this mutant hatred and all kind of thing and all stuff, is when there was a story that involved it and needed to be told. That was it. As I stated before, Stanley created the X-Men because he was lazy and didn't want to come up with reasons for why they always had powers. Okay. No, but then he decided, instead of them always being like, loved and one than the other, let's have them be hated for who they are this time around. And then we could, so we go that, so okay, you have people who hate them. So he says to himself, you know what, we have this civil rights movement going on right now. We could take an element of that as to why the X-Men are being hated, the X-Men are hated, and use that in the story. And people mistakenly think that means it's connected to the civil rights. It's not. If somebody writes a story about, let's say that there's this virus that spreads across the world, a lot of people die, and some people who get the virus and survive manage to get superpowers. All right, that's the basis of the story of what's happening. And then somebody said, well, okay, we had this going on with the other. We just had COVID. They did the whole lockdown. Let's use that element of the lockdown in this comic as to, as something that happened during this whole thing that caused people to get powers and all kind of things. So they incorporate that into it. Does that mean that the whole book is about COVID? No. You took a simple element from something and incorporated it into your story. Any good writer will tell you, you write what you know. You can take aspects of things that happen in the real world and incorporate it into the story, but it's always going to be about the story. That is the essential part here. So people are mistaking things. And there are people who actually believe that, Stan Lee intended Professor X and Magneto to be allegories for Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. Somebody actually told me that and could not provide any evidence in regards to it because it's not true. You heard something from somebody who wants to push an agenda, and this is what you've come to the realization of. No, the facts are clear. Let's continue on. The civil rights allegory was never a part of the original script, but the civil rights allegory became talking points for Marvel during the 1980s and 1990s during Chris Claremont's tenure on the book. Stan Lee did not create the characters like this and Magneto to be a villain, even though he eventually said, no, listen to what Stan Lee said, and I'll explain it. I did not think of Magneto as a bad guy. He was just trying to strike back at the people who were so bigoted and racist. He was trying to defend mutants, and because society was not treating them fairly, he decided to teach society a lesson. He was a danger, of course, but I never thought of him as a villain. Now, when people hear the part, people who were so bigoted and racist, they leave out the other part. He was trying to defend mutants. I'll come back to why this is important shortly. Stan Lee designed Magneto as the leader of a group that called themselves the Brotherhood of Evil. Doesn't get much evil than that. Brotherhood of Evil Mutants in the original run. Stan Lee's later words are a retcon trying to make some kind of public relations out of the X-Men once the book became widely popular under Chris Claremont's tenure. Now, people want to say retcon. I would say he was just trying to play up the success of what Chris Claremont had done. I wouldn't really call it a retcon because nothing about the characters fundamentally would change. But if you want that as soon as a retcon, okay, no problem. All right, let me continue on. Magneto had nothing to do with Malcolm X, but the character and Professor X were actually framed after Jewish leaders David Ben-Gurion and Menachem Begin. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Forgive me if I did not. I'm talking about here when they say so bigoted and racist and then trying to defend mutants. The very aspect of racism anything to do with mutants, because racism is basically you hate somebody because of their race. Right? That's basically what it boils down to. You hate somebody because of their race. How they look or something like that. That's when you hate them. But that doesn't actually work in the context of mutants. Storm is black. Colossus is German, I think. No, Russian, sorry, Russian. Kitty Pryde is Jewish. That does not actually work there. And even if you say, well, racism is based on, on how they look, the majority of mutants look perfectly normal, look human. Well, mutants are human. Well, let's say they look perfectly normal. If you look at Wolverine, Shadowcat, Storm, Rogue, Jean Grey, Colossus, when he isn't in metal form, he's just a big Russian guy. You understand me? Professor X, hell, even Magneto, they don't look any different from anything. You understand me? They look perfectly human. So they aren't being hated on how they look. Yes, now there are mutants who look different, and that's why they have like Nightcrawler, Spike, Mystique. Well, even though Mystique is a shapeshifter, but her original form is blue. You understand me? Leech and the others like them, they look how they look, and yes, they are hated and despised because of how they look, but the vast majority of mutants don't look any different from humans. Even Cyclops looks perfectly human unless he takes off his shades, then it becomes a different matter there. And that is the point. People genuinely hate mutants in Marvel Comics because of what they can do, not how they look. Not because the vast majority of them, like I say, look human. But you have mutants like Magneto, Storm, Iceman, who could wipe out entire countries because of the powers that they have and the ability that they have. That is why people hate these mutants, and they use all kind of like mutate and all kind of thing, but they hate them because of their powers, and that is part of it. Yes, is there an element of bigotry in there? Of course, but that's why they hate them. But then you look at the comparison. You have heroes like Spider-Man. Spider-Man doesn't have an ad campaign out there saying, I was bitten by a radioactive spider, I'm not a mutant. But no, he's treated differently. X-Men have always kind of been a separate entity unto themselves in Marvel Comics. You understand me? And that is it because they were created to be hated for who they were. Because again, the basis of X-Men is that they are trying to save and defend our world. That hates them. That is their thing. They are outsiders. You can garner many things from those books because the X-Men have always been outsiders. That's why, because it was a book for everybody. At some point in anybody's life, we've all felt like an outsider one way or another. You understand me? That's what makes it, because when the book was for everybody, it was for everybody. Now it's for a certain group of people and nobody wants it. When it was for everybody, it was for everybody. So it has nothing to do with racism. You hate it about hating mutants. That's it. Now people are going to say, well, that is just indicative of how gay and trans people have to hide who they are. There is one reason why that is very incorrect. The simple fact of it is nobody cares if you're gay or trans. Nobody does. That's your personal business. Nobody cares about that. When you go for a job interview, nobody's going to ask you, are you gay, are you trans? They're not groups of people roaming the streets trying to kill you because you're different. No. The majority of people do not care what you do in the privacy of your home. Most people may not agree with your lifestyle, but they are accepting. They're not going to go out and attack you or anything like that. But there are people who have weaponized victimhood and turned it into this thing like, everybody must love and worship me for being gay because that's who I am. And I must tell you that, and if you say, well, oh God, just do your job, and no, that is somehow attacking them. X-Men and mutants are targeted because they're mutants. It has nothing to do with racism or bigotry. No, but you keep trying to assign real-world elements to something that does not add up when you look at it objectively in the comics. Go on, eh? Chris Claremont modeled the X-Men in a United Nations-style world where the characters came from all over the globe, working together from different backgrounds and cultures, as was a progressive dream in the 1980s. It closely modeled Star Trek, where characters would have their cultures and yet to be able to do more together. This was evident in making a character a Russian like Colossus and a German priest like Nightcrawler, among many others. As usual, the idea that the X-Men were about black civil rights was very much overstated. That is my point. It has nothing to do with anything for the civil rights or any kind of racial or anything like that, because there are different multitudes of people there. That is a fact. That is an actual fact in regards to it. Now, the story that Chris Claremont did, God Loves, Men Kills, was kind of a basis for a lot of what people think in regards to all the bigotry and thing with it. You had Stryker who wanted to kill all mutants. And actually that book was the basis for the X2 movie, right? Is there bigotry in that book? Yes, because he wanted to kill all mutants. It had nothing to do with anybody's race or religion. That he just wanted to kill mutants. That was the basis of it. That spanned a lot of things in the stories going forward. Yes, but the bottom line of it is, it involves mutants. That's it. And like I said, most mutants look human, but they are hated and prejudiced because of the abilities that they have. But you have other characters in the Marvel Universe who have powers and abilities, can do things, but they aren't treated like mutants because that is how the mutants were designed to be. So that is the point I want to make in regards to what Stan Lee and Chris Claremont have to say. Now, Chuck Dixon actually follows up and makes some very, very interesting points in regards to it. Chuck Dixon rebukes claims that the X-Men and comics have always been woke. And what he says is exactly what I've been saying in regards to it. Legendary comic book writer Chuck Dixon, known for his runs on Batman, Punisher, Conan, Robin, Birds of Prey, and more, recently rebuked the claim that the X-Men have always been woke, because they haven't. Right. As part of his ongoing Ask Chuck Dixon series, Rising Star Comics queried Dixon, what do you think when people use X-Men as an example of how comics were always woke/political? Questioner added, to me personally, I always thought that was a weak argument that had no basis in actual fact, because in X-Men, up until the racism angle wasn't even that core to the X-Men as a whole. It was an action-adventure, superhero, sci-fi, fantasy, romantic soap opera with everything in the kitchen sink that had an outsider theme on top of it. Plus, X-Men was often very un-PC, definitely not woke, as evident when the same people who parrot that line tried to cancel Claremont last year. And yeah, because when it comes to the woke mob, you can't do anything they don't like. That's it. This is why I tell people stay away from it. Dixon responded, it's funny, isn't it? The thing about wokeism and political correctness and all the rest of it is the goalposts are always moving. Yep. Always moving. Okay, he goes on here. When you take the X-Men, the original X-Men in particular, who I saw as a pack of winners and winners, and now you make them victims, like professional victims, continue. And I agree with you that the outsider element is cool. But the outsider element is part of every superhero story, isn't it? They have a secret identity, they have an alter ego, of course, they are an outsider. Exactly, look at it. Spider-Man, Batman, hell, Superman, Wonder Woman, who else? Lots of other heroes, Daredevil, all of them. They were all outsiders, and we all agree because we all like that aspect of it, of knowing that, okay, these people may have a secret identity. We all wanted to be superheroes at one point or another. You understand me? We all love the powers and the reason that the X-Men are, and we all thought ourselves, oh, it would be so cool if we had these powers. They had nothing to do with any kind of woke nonsense. It's about escapism. That's the bottom line of it. Continues on, but taking it this far and saying the comics are always political. They may have dealt with the issues of the day. I was on a podcast with John Bear recently, and he brought up the fact that the X-Men would often have discussions about religious faith because Kitty Pryde was a Jew, Colossus was an atheist, Kurt was a Catholic, and they would have discussions about these things. These are things that help ground these characters in who they are. You understand? When you give characters actual nuances and actual character development, instead of just saying, you know what, this character is gay, that's all they need to be, nothing else. When is the last time you saw Iceman do anything of any kind of importance? Never, nothing. And it wasn't anything to tell the reader what to think on those subjects. It was simply the characters exploring these issues, and it made them seem deeper, more relatable, more real than they had thoughts like this. That these were independently thinking characters instead of just people on paper. Exactly, this is why we like these characters, because they are so deep and they're so meaningful. And the thing is, I'll hear the argument, well, Superman was political. Superman, he was a big FDR liberal because he would harass abusive, greedy landlords. That's posing the argument that there's someone who likes greedy landlords. How is that political? Who likes greedy landlords? Nobody does. Exactly my point. The same way people say that, the X-Men have always been political. The X-Men had political stories in them because you literally had the United States building sentinel robots to go and hunt down and kill mutants. How is that not a political-based story? It has nothing to do with anything in the real world injecting itself into it. Is the United States government building robots to hunt down people? No. Come on now, man. Continues on. So that's not political. That's Superman being a vigilante crime fighter, standing for truth, justice, and the American way. The American way certainly isn't high rents and throwing orphans into the streets. That ain't the American way, so there's nothing really political. Exactly. And maybe politics are a part of a story. Exactly like I now said in regards to the whole United States building sentinels to go after mutants. But that doesn't excuse you injecting your agenda, your political agenda, your personal point of view into superhero stories and telling the reader what to think, or shaming the reader, or literally shaming the reader. Exactly. These people keep trying to inject their modern nonsense, their modern gender studies nonsense into things that were never like that. Like I said, comics dealt with things already. Comics dealt with drugs, with racism, with theft, with crime. All these different things have been dealt with. Does anybody like crime? No. Does anybody love racism? No. Does anybody love what? No. These are things that have always been there because these are what superheroes deal with. There's nothing really involved in anything like that. These are simple stories that needed to be told. Telling readers that if you don't agree with my political stance or the political stance that I've put in the mouth of Wolverine or Batman, then I don't want you reading my comics. It's divisive. Comics were meant to be divisive. They have universal themes, and there are characters you agree with and characters you don't. He then provided examples. Daredevil's always been the bleeding heart liberal. Frank Castle's always been the direct opposite. You can argue about Batman's politics or Ben Grimm's politics, but in the end it's about escapism, fiction. Dixon concluded. That's what it is about. Whether you don't like Batman has always been Batman. Ben Grimm has always been Ben Grimm. And if you think about Ben Grimm is famous because he's a big rock monster, but he isn't treated like a mutant. Again, as I say, there is no argument here for the fact that mutants or X-Men have always been woke. No. X-Men have always been, has always been and continues to be a superhero story. Yes, what they've done to it now is absolutely atrocious. Nobody's denying that. But it had nothing to do with wokeness. All these things people are trying to say, well, in regards to it, racism was never a part of anything because of what racism is. That had nothing to do with it. It was about mutants. That was it. You understand? And when the X-Men weren't fighting some global threat or something like that, they were off in space doing something. Those were the stories that were being told. So I hope now I have clarified what I've been trying to say in regards to the X-Men and how they were not woke, how comics in general were not always woke. It had nothing to do with these things. Nothing to do with it. But you keep trying to act like all these things were always happening and they were always there when they weren't. These people who do all this woke nonsense are trying to make everything about it. You may think this, well, okay, I'm talking about this, I'm talking about that, and I'm not getting into this and you're with them. No. This is what they try to do. They try to inject themselves into everything. When it isn't comics, it's television, it's movies. Look at Star Wars. Star Wars is an absolute embarrassment unto itself now. Fans have walked away from that. The MCU is practically dead at this point. You understand? Because all this nonsense is being pushed in there when it has no business being there. Stories that were being told and everything were good before. There was no need to want to push anything because they had nothing to do with wokeness. It was about telling good stories. That's it. It all boils down to one thing. It's about escapism in these books with characters that we all like, teaching lessons and values and all these things that were always important and were always there. That's it. Let me know your thoughts on this in the comments. I have a different opinion. I'd love to hear it. If you like the video, hit that thumbs up. Subscribe if you haven't already. Ring the notification bell to be notified every time I put out a new video. And I shall see you all next time. Take care.